Because I love Australia, I have to tell the world what is happening here. It is not an exaggeration to say that we're heading down the path of dictatorship. People who disagree with the government are like sheep hunted by wolves. Protesters are shot at. The police come knocking on your door. Employers tell you to resign with severance or get fired without one. Now what's happening? Let me list you some of the things. If you're not vaccinated, you lose your voting rights as a member of parliament. This is something unprecedented. I believe we're the first state in the history of the world, in the history of democracy. It's the first time where elected representatives cannot represent the people because they're part of the dissenting voice of the people. If you're not vaccinated here in Victoria, you can't work. It's the no jab, no job policy directive. What happens if you don't comply? $21,000 fine for an individual, $110,000 fine for a church or a business. These are absurd rules and arbitrary fines. They're cruel and they're unusual penalties for non-compliance. I think they're just designed to strike fear in the heart of people. Number 3, if you're not vaccinated, you can't shop, eat out, or get a haircut. And the rules are becoming stricter and stricter. As I say, they boil you slowly. They've already written down that eventually, if you're not vaccinated, you can't access all basic services until 2023. So this is the no shot, no shop. No shot, no shop. The fine again is $110,000 for the shop and $21,000 for the individual that doesn't comply. So by the very definition, the people now are slaves. You know, a slave is someone who needs permission to eat, to work, to worship, to travel, to shop, to get a haircut, to eat outside, to go to the gym, to travel. You need permission from a very overbearing state. Well, you say then just don't worry about it, get vaccinated. Okay, if you're vaccinated, you must check in using a QR code which allows the government to track you. Now, all businesses are being roped in to become part of the state's total digital surveillance apparatus. They want electronic record keeping by all businesses. Customers are to, quote, check in everywhere you visit using the S.O.S Victoria app, no matter how long you spend at that location, close quote. Number 5, if you are vaccinated, you will soon have to use the EQR code every time you make a purchase. This way, nobody can, I guess, skip on being tracked. As soon as you spend or make a purchase, this EQR will automatically track both your spending and your location digitally. And it all gets reported. Number 6, all of this is leading towards implementing the Australian digital ID system, which in my view is a totalitarian control over the states. Now some people, they don't believe all this, even living here. It's kind of like the people in Germany. They didn't believe fascism. They didn't believe Nazism was going to murder, you know, in World War II, 75 million people. Not just 6 million Jews, 75 million. They couldn't see it. They couldn't fathom it. And people went to the Olympics when Hitler, you know, put on a show. And the description, when you watch like documentaries about World War II, is how often people say they were surprised by what Adolf Hitler did. So the people here doubt that this is going to lead any further. But in case you doubt that the goal is political control and not merely our medical welfare, on Tuesday, the 26th of October, 2021, the Premier of this state, Dan Andrews, tabled a law to give him permanent emergency powers. Okay, this is not like Star Wars and, the Emperor getting emergency powers, right? I mean, it sounds like a movie. It sounds like the plot of a dystopian movie. This is real. He will be able, when this law passes, to declare lockdowns, impose fines, and impose jail time at his pleasure on political dissidents, anyone who disagrees with him. Normally, a bill would sit in Parliament for at least a month for debate, but 2 days later, it was tabled on the 26th. 2 days later, on the 28th, this bill has already passed the lower house. Now, how is it that they get away with this? Because, again, remember premise number 1 that I showed you. If you are not vaccinated, you cannot enter Parliament or even vote digitally. I mean, we have the internet, right? If you're going to exclude them because of health reasons, elected officials, you're going to exclude them from entering basically like the equivalent of Congress, you could say, okay, we're concerned about our safety, but you have a right to represent the people, so just press a button and send your vote in digitally. Nope. They made sure anyone who doesn't vax or disagrees with their policy cannot even vote. So they can push through, they can ram through things like permanent emergency power. And I'll give you a citation, I'll give you a secular news article that talks about it, because a lot of people don't believe. It's like living in Germany, and people don't believe what's happening, and then the rise of Nazism. The ridiculousness of the fines knows no bounds. It reaches even to the children. If you don't wear a mask, the fine for children under 15 is now $181.74. I'm not sure what the 74 cents does, but they make it very precise, I guess. The fine for children between the ages of 15 and 18 is now $726.96. Can you imagine that? Which 15-year-old is going to pay over $700 for not wearing a mask? And what has this got to do with health? Number 8, the government is turning every business and church into a branch of their digital surveillance. They are encouraging gyms, shops, and businesses to have snitches, what they call COVID marshals, to report a breach of emergency restrictions. And they say community members can raise concerns about compliance with directions through a police assistance line, a PAL. You can be a PAL. And they give the number. And I just find that amazing because every police person I've ever met is already overworked. Many times as a pastor, I've had to deal with people who have had break-ins or thefts. And the police either respond an hour later or don't even come. I mean, this is not once or twice. We've had a break-in as a church. We had over $20,000 of equipment stolen. The police never came. When we finally got to them, they took down a report, left. We never heard back. Because, somebody's out there with church equipment and, God will deal with them. But the police are overworked. So now you're going to make a special hotline for people to snitch on each other. What does that sound like to you? If you know anything about history, you know that sounds like fascism. Now, number 9, the worst part of all this is actually not all the above. It's not the politicians, because all politicians want power, and most of them want it indefinitely. That's no surprise to us. What is surprising to me as I live here and watch this is how willingly the average Australian complies with draconian measures and suffer the loss of their freedoms and rights. I hate to say it, but Australians tend to be a naive population, and many don't believe that any overreach is happening. Many are like sheep ready for the slaughter, and few understand the history of tyranny. The government, if you're a Christian, you need to know, the government crucified our Lord Jesus Christ. The government sanctioned slavery. The government started the Iraq War on a lie. The government started the Afghanistan War on a lie. I am not anti-government because the Bible tells me that God puts certain people in power for our good. But when they don't act for our good, we need to be skeptical about giving them more power to abuse us. I believe that they should not have powers that are beyond the limits of the Constitution and the English Bill of Rights and the U.S. Bill of Rights. I am for holding accountable politicians who are corrupt and who lie to us. Well, what kind of lie? Well, there's a litany, a whole list of lies. They said no vaccine passport will ever be mandated. Well, that's a lie. That's coming. They said no mandatory vaccine. That's a lie. It's already here in every state. They said there'll just be a 7-day snap lockdown. Well, that's a lie. It became 77 days. And even when they say lockdown is easing, it's not true because it becomes a lockout. They said lockdowns would give us freedom. That's a lie. They said 80% double vaccination will give us freedom to everybody, and that's a lie. Soon they will announce triple vaccination so you can buy your own freedom. And they won't end there, because this is the history of tyranny. Soon, if you don't have monthly shots, basically a license to live, you won't be able to access your bank accounts and your property. And it always seemed far-fetched. Fascism and dictatorship seems far-fetched until you're in the middle of it. Australians believe everything the government and TV tells them. We are a sheepish nation that overly trusts the goodness of politicians. Everything I'm saying today is to help Australians defend our freedom. And yet, you will see, it will be Australians who will attack me the most. It's really like trying to save a drowning person too early. They will claw you, they will scratch your skin off because they don't understand. You almost have to wait for them to almost drown, and then they will surrender. If you don't believe that this is what's happening, I understand. It seems so surreal. I'm going to read to you a secular news source, the Daily Mail from the UK. Quote, Dan Andrews could be given extraordinary, unprecedented powers to restrict movement, ban public gatherings, and shut businesses during a pandemic, even if there are 0 cases. I mean, that would be the definition of no pandemic. New state emergency laws would strip out independent health advice. All power would be given to politicians instead, without doctors signing off. The total control would last for blocks of 3 months at a time before renewal. The Premier wants the new laws in place before the current laws or the current state of emergency expires around Christmas. Quote, even if there were no cases in Victoria, the Premier would be able to shut down businesses, restrict movement, ban public gatherings, that would include churches, and enact quarantine. The current state of emergency legislation has been enforced since COVID pandemic first hit Australia in March 2020. Victoria's existing laws enforce Melbourne's 6 lockdowns, making the city endure the most cumulative days in COVID shutdown in the world until it so said ended last Friday after 262 days in total. Well, I don't think it's ended at all, but they're using this language like to give people, make people grateful for what they're doing. Those laws allow the introduction of hotel quarantine, the restriction on mass gatherings and business operations, and implemented mandatory mask wearing. Well, actually, all of those things are still in place, so I don't know why they say it's ended. Liberal Shadow Attorney General Tim Smith said the current strict powers already made Victoria suffer more COVID cases, deaths, and job losses than any other Australian state. And I live here, so I can tell you, when there was no vaccine mandate, no mask mandate, we were going at 5 to 10 cases a week. When we were required to be double vaccinated up to 80% of the population, the cases are now highest ever. So it's more than 2,000 a day. So that would be the definition of failure if you were following the data.
Let me paint you a picture. Australia, once known as one of the safest and freest countries in the world. A land of spirit and ceremony. A land of opportunity where the hopeful came for a new start so their children could be free and prosperous. where the battler had a chance and poor men made good. A land where you were free to explore your surroundings. A land with room to spread one's wings. A land of brotherhood, celebration, and connection. A land where you came to visit and didn't want to leave. A land of privacy rights, medical rights, freedom of speech, freedom of movement, freedom to protest, freedom to worship, thanks to their sacrifice. But something happened.
Today is the first full day of the New World Order.
We've got to accept that this is the New World Order.
The New World Order? And the Australia we once knew is no more.
Lockdown 6 was announced on August 5.
It is no longer the land of the young and free. It is now a land of division, blackmail, coercion, discrimination, and medical apartheid.
Get off of me!
A land where movement, speech, religion, and opinion are no longer free. Protesting is illegal. Police must enforce corrupt policies to keep their jobs.
As I won't be a police officer after the end of this interview.
Police shoot protesters in the back while they are running away.
Australia!
Doctors and nurses cannot speak. They will lose their license.
I can't really talk about that.
People have lost their jobs because they don't want the injection. Children are missing school and attempting suicide at a high rate. We need to show our papers to go shopping.
If you want freedom, get the jab.
We can't travel across state borders unless we apply for permission to. Members of Parliament are censored and defamed.
100% of those studies... It's a conspiracy theory.
Pregnant women are arrested for a social media post.
Search warrant.
Search warrant for what?
Activists who fight for democracy are imprisoned.
At the moment you're under arrest for incitement.
Our human rights are gone. Our human rights are gone.
It's time that we take off the COVID blinkers and look at what's happened to our once great and free country.
Australia can no longer fight for itself. We have been silenced, assaulted, blackmailed and psychologically damaged. We tried to fight this battle alone. The government has instilled so much fear that we have lost our vigour to fight. We are a broken nation, and although we will never give up, we need your help to continue our fight. We need help from our international friends. We are seeking your support to apply political and economic pressure on our leaders to change the destructive path that we are on. That is why we are organising a worldwide protest, with Australia excluded, in support of our plight for freedom. This is an official SOS from my beautiful country. We plead with you to hear our cries for help.